The following podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed therein are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent any organizations they are attached to, most especially the World's Elsewhere Theatre Company. Pygmalion saw these women waste their lives in wretched shame, and critical of faults which nature had so deeply planted through their female hearts, he lived in preference for many years unmarried. But while he was single with consummate skill, he carved a statue out of snow-white ivory and gave to it exquisite beauty which no woman of the world has ever equaled. She was so beautiful, he fell in love with his creation. London at 11:15 p.m. Torrents of heavy summer rain. Cab whistles blowing frantically in all directions. Pedestrians running for shelter into the portico of St. Paul's Church. Not Brent's Cathedral, but Inigo Jones's church. In Covent Garden, Vegetable Market. Among them a lady and her daughter in evening dress. All are peering out gloomily at the rain, except one man, with his back turned to the rest, wholly preoccupied with the notebook in which he is writing. Welcome to A Niche Retelling, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new, and welcome to yet another World's Elsewhere special.
It's Sam Marchioni, and today I'm feeling lovely.
Aww.
My name is Alana Greenberg-Sood, and I am the artistic director for World's Elsewhere Theatre Company, and I'm the producer for Pygmalion.
This one's pretty near and dear to our hearts, because if you're listening to this when it first drops, that means we're about a week away from the World's Elsewhere Theatre Company's production of Pygmalion airing, that is directed by our very own Sam, and not to brag or anything, but it is starring me.
Jazz is our Eliza.
Very excited. I mean, if you've listened to our My Fair Lady episode, you know I love that girl.
And this is also... Honestly, I will blame my not being on the My Fair Lady episode partially for my decision to do this.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that. So, obviously, Sam, this is not your first time directing for Worlds Elsewhere. You also directed Roaring Girl, which I was also in. So, yeah, why Pygmalion?
Well, it was actually a thing Alana and I had agreed early on that I'd be doing the show with them in some capacity.
Little bit about how World's Elsewhere works from the inside. About half the main stage plays that we do are selected at least partially democratically by the repertory, in that we give them a couple of options and they vote, and then company leadership choose what we're going to do based on what people seem interested in.
We were kind of toying with some of Shaw's lesser known works, but we had questions about like the acceptability, because George Bernard Shaw, complicated person, and
as are most white male writers from that time period.
Yeah, and one of the plays we really wanted to do was this really great satire called Press Cuttings. Unfortunately, Press Cuttings has a lot of stuff that honestly feels very turfy, like, not to spoil it or anything, but there's a character who insists that all the important historical figures who were women actually had to be men because men actually want to be women, and all the male historical figures who are important are women. Like, kind of turfy conspiracy, and we were staring at it like, how do we fix this? Can we fix this?
Are you telling me Shaw invented the transvestigator?
I have no idea. I might also be misremembering this, because I read the script months ago, and after a certain point we were like, no, Pygmalion.
Sometimes the most well-known work of a person is the most well-known for a reason, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, so I've known My Fair Lady since when I was younger than I can remember. And I was familiar with some of the key differences between My Fair Lady and Pygmalion. And so it's something that I had actually had on the list of plays we should do sometime for a while. And so we wanted to put together a play for the winter that wasn't necessarily a winter play, because like that's all well and cool and we've done that before, but we wanted to just be like, let's just do a play. And I had already started some of the script editing, well, script collection and dramaturgical work for it. So, but we decided that because basically Sam and I did like kind of a toss up for who would direct it. She had ideas for what she wanted to do with the play. So we decided she'd direct it and I'd produce, and we'd start with the work I'd already done. And then, once we started trimming it down and deciding who the final characters were going to be and things like that, we started shaping it toward her specific vision because she had like specific things she wanted to highlight.
I actually very recently read Pygmalion for the first time in preparation for our My Fair Lady episode. So I know that it hasn't been changed so much that it's basically a retelling. Like, it's still very much the text of the play, just with adjustments that suit our very witsy ways, basically.
Yeah. The discussion of the artificiality of class distinction, but how that can still harm people. The issue of women's rights to their own selves and their own bodies and their own livelihoods and what have you. And even though this play is over 100 years old now, there are a lot of things that are very familiar. And then because we're Worlds Elsewhere, and Worlds Elsewhere has definitely picked up my motto of make it gayer, Sam and I spent a certain amount of time figuring out how we would do that.
Some of what we ended up doing didn't solidify until auditions. But I said this when I first promoted it to my friends on Facebook. What was really drawing me in was the idea of class as arbitrary signifiers, and we decided we were going to push it further into gender is arbitrary signifier, because the more you think about it, like, I'm not going to lie, My Fair Lady colors a lot of how I see Pygmalion, and there's some stuff I actually do think My Fair Lady improves upon in Pygmalion, but there's some stuff in Pygmalion that goes so fucking hard, and My Fair Lady is a coward for leaving it out. But the idea of making a woman, which is what Higgins says to Eliza at certain points towards the end of the show, I'm like, you made your idea of a woman. You don't get to define womanhood, Henry Higgins. You're the most misanthropic, misogynist, homophobic homosexual that ever existed.
Yes, absolutely. We talk about how My Fair Lady obviously colors how we see this show, and I'm sorry, but somebody decided, no, this seems like the kind of character who would ask why a woman can't be more like a man, and frankly, it's not a bad interpretation of this character.
Yeah.
Rex Harrison was like, are we sure he's not gay? This was in the 60s, for fuck's sake.
And I have plenty of beef with Rex Harrison as well, but he did get it there.
No, and it's been so much fun kind of looking at it through that lens. I guess I kind of always looked at it through that lens, because even before I had properly seen My Fair Lady, I had read how Lea Salonga had actually tried to star in a production of it through the lens of, this could easily be like a commentary on colonialism as well, of course.
It absolutely could, and I haven't been lucky enough to see it, but I know that the most recent touring production of My Fair Lady, they've had Black Elizas, and I'm sure it's interesting there. Although when I did see it, we did have a Black Freddy. He was cute as a button, but,
I think Callie's seen that one too.
Yeah. See, this is kind of the downside of people going the Lin-Manuel Miranda Hamilton route of casting, is that you potentially lose these really compelling and interesting avenues to explore, but at the same time, it's not something you want, say, Bartlett Sher trying to explore. For all that this is Pygmalion, I wanted this to be as Galatea a Pygmalion as possible to make the mythology comparison all the more labored. I did actually read some various notes from Shaw, and that at one point he was going to have Higgins exclaim out, Galatea! And I was like,
I could see why he didn't, because that might have been like, do you get it? Do you get it, audience?
But I'd never actually done anything with Pygmalion or even technically read the full thing before we decided to dig into this. But My Fair Lady is one of my favorite musicals, so it was fun to dig into it and and actually like, okay, ignore the romance that is the primary focus of My Fair Lady, and let's focus on some of the more political things that Shaw had to say.
Which is what he would have wanted. So congratulations.
Yeah. And also hashtag Eliza would never.
No,
so many people bugged Shaw about about changing the ending so that she'd get together with
Henry,
Higgins.
which-
That
Sure, fine.
that
Shippers are often wrong.
yeah. And he actually, in the later printed editions of the play, there's a full epilogue.
Oh yeah, I read
and
it.
a big chunk of it is him explaining why Eliza would never and what his view of the ending would be.
Yeah, she does often still come back to visit, but she does not come back to him, period. And there's even this whole point where she even, like, every so often she'll think, basically, if he were the last man on Earth, would I? And even then she's like, probably not. Which I think
Smart
is great.
Woman.
Yeah, Shaw was just like, fine, you want to know what happens next? Here's what happens next. And it's like, he's punishing them.
Exactly. And it's great.
Reading Shaw's afterward, where he goes into so much fucking detail about how no, Higgins and Eliza would absolutely never end up together.
Like, ever. No, I know. Like, no, he was so bitter about people shipping Henry and Eliza. It's just
absolute nonsense.
Yeah, like, dear audience, I talked about it a bit with the My Fair Lady episode, but now that I'm talking to somebody who has also read it, now we can really potentially go into how insanely detailed it went. This was almost enough material for a spin-off television show or something.
Why did you have to say spin-off television show? Now, Selfie, that was like the one time Hen Liza worked for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to make John Cho not charming. That man deserves a better career. John
Cho.
Indeed, that man deserves a better career. Or at the very least, give him an Austin. So, is there anything else you'd like to discuss in terms of production? Particularly, I'm sure things have been adjusted as you've worked with the actors and such.
Yeah,
Press and company included, of course.
So it wasn't until auditions that we were looking at our character makeup. We'd been toying with, like, is this on the more modern side? Is this, an alternate universe where being gay is A-okay?
Are we going full Bridgerton on this one?
Eventually we came to the idea that we're not going full Bridgerton with this, but we did want to kind of work with the idea that the lower class people are less confined by the compulsory heterosexuality and expectations in a different way than the higher class people can shrug off that stuff. Because, like, Higgins makes a big deal out of him and Pickering being confirmed old bachelors, which,
quotation,
as we all know, is old-timey code for gay as fuck. But we have a wonderful actress playing Freddie, Kristen Heider, and God, we saw that and we were immediately like, Freddie could be, we ended up with Winifred.
Yes.
And suddenly it becomes this thing of like, Eliza is perhaps the character most self-actualized in this play. And it was trying to take some of that, like, I'd argue Freddie views Eliza kind of as his manic pixie dream girl, especially if your main point of reference to all of this is My Fair Lady, and the sweetest anthem to stalkering ever is your main takeaway with Freddie.
Miss Doolittle says she doesn't want to see anyone ever again.
But why? She was unbelievable.
So I've been told, sir. Is there any further message?
Yes, tell her I'll wait.
But it might be days or even weeks.
But don't you see, I'll be happier here. People stop and stare. They don't bother me. For there's nowhere else on earth that I would rather be. Let the time go by. I won't care if I can be here on the street where you live.
I love On the Street Where You Live. It is a beautiful, romantic, sweeping ballad. motherfucker, you knew her one day.
You heard her say funny things at one social event and suddenly you're ready to put a ring on it. I love it so much. And the thing is, it's not like she was trying to be funny. And that's the kind of hilarious thing about their relationship. It's just like, Freddie, you realize she did not do that on purpose, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I give My Fair Lady credit for, because to be clear, we're using the public domain version of Shaw's script, which was published in 1914. He did go back in like the 40s and make revisions, which is how you get an actual experience of the character who would become Zoltan Karpathy in the musical. Because there's some stuff in what we're making the second half, Acts 4 and 5 of Pygmalion, you're like, where the fuck did that come from? Because Freddie does not come back in the second half of the play.
No.
And so at the end, when Eliza's like, you know what, I'll marry Freddie, I'm like, you've seen Freddie once.
Technically twice, but I don't know if even Freddie knows that.
Yeah. But, so basically, I wanted to, like, kind of subvert the manic pixie dream girlness that Freddie puts onto Eliza by having Eliza, another instance of Freddie realizing that she is not the only woman who is queer, using multiple applications of that term. And we made some changes. I don't want to spoil it, but just to drop a very obvious hint, listeners, you may remember, I'm from Boston. Look up what a Boston marriage is.
Please do. Yes. Yep.
And history will say they were roommates.
And historians will call them close friends, besties, roommates, colleagues, anything but lovers. History hates lovers, sidekicks, family, good pals, buddies, anything but lovers. History hates lovers.
But it's also, like, in the play, which is not in the musical, Freddie has a sister named Clara. Read the afterword, because Clara becomes an H.G. Wells fan. I'm like, oh, is that like being a friend of Dorothy?
I don't know. I don't know. It never occurred to me to associate being a fan of H.G. Wells with being queer, but as somebody who is a queer lover of sci-fi and horror, sure, I'll take it. See, what made me read Clara as queer in that epilogue is how she really took inspiration from Eliza.
There's a little bit of not so much analysis, but presence of queerness, but mostly we're focusing on class and gender. You wind up with people that have, like, inherited stuff that's been in their family for hundreds of years, and then somebody spent all the money, and so by the 1800s the money is gone. 1800s, and it's a great starter for both a romance or a horror flick. But it's not in the case here. The Einsford Hills are kind of, we're not doing the romance sort of, but
it's there, but it's not really the focus. It never really was in the show. I mean, in the original play, I should say. My Fair Lady very much beefed it up, and could have possibly made better choices in how they beefed it up, but that's another story.
Go listen to the My Fair Lady podcast. I'm sure that y'all talked about that.
We very much did.
And then the Eliza and her father are poor, but her father refers to himself, at least, who largely refuses to work. And even though he has a job, he actually has two jobs, mostly makes his money, finagling it out of other people. And he refers to himself as the undeserving poor. And he has a lot to say about stereotypes about poverty and things like that. And the play itself shows you that, nothing is ever new, because there's literally a line that whether Eliza should be paid for participating in the experiment. And somebody says that if you pay her, she'll only drink. And it's like, I have heard that now, that why you shouldn't give money to homeless people. But
I think there was some comedian at the time who retorted to that sort of sentiment. It's just like, I'm sorry, aren't you going to be doing that with your own money anyway?
Yeah, well, but they're drinking, not somebody else. So anyhow, but yeah.
I like this idea because in the play, Shaw specifically references the Einsford Hills as being genteel poverty. Like, they have the name and the title, but not any real finances. We worked with Kristen and Michelle and Chinadu to make like this whole elaborate backstory of Mr. Eynsford Hill is off somewhere gambling all the money away. And, you know, they're kind of insolvent on their own. There's this kind of divide between the family of like, who's going to take care of Mama, who's going to get married. We put Freddie on the outs in the tradition of Harold, they're lesbians.
Right.
Spinster life!
Oof, too real.
But I wanted to kind of make it a situation where Eliza's juxtaposed not only with them, but with her father, because Alfred also has a level of class mobility that he doesn't enjoy any more than Eliza enjoys hers. But Eliza is more willing and equipped to deal with it and adapt to a new age, whereas I think Alfred will get pulled into an unhappy kind of life, because he will forever be romanticizing his old life, but by his own admission is too cowardly to give up the affluence that has been thrust upon him through a pre-digested cheese trust.
Just, oh no. You don't have to worry about being one emergency away from being completely impoverished. Oh no.
Oh, boo-hoo. You now have relatives asking you for help. Poor thing.
Alfred Doolittle was always obnoxious. It just so happens the musical numbers made it worse.
Yeah, I mean, they are earworms. We cannot deny. They are.
They go on so long, though. Really grinds the pacing to a halt. We talked a lot about that in the episode, but
I have a soft spot in my heart for them. That's
super valid.
That's me, though.
Yeah, we kind of covered all the characters. That's the thing. There's not a whole lot of characters in Pygmalion, and yet it's still so long.
Yeah, because George Bernard Shaw loves the sound of his own words. River, who is our AD for this, River has sworn an eternal vendetta against George Bernard Shaw, second to their eternal vendetta with Richard Curtis, whom they will be hunting for sport. I think River wants to turn George Bernard Shaw's garden into a gender-neutral bathroom because, much to River's disappointment, George Bernard Shaw was cremated and his ashes scattered in his garden, and so he does not have a grave to spin in.
I think at this point, River is just determined to start a 1NB war against British writers in general. Which, actually, considering some of the British writers, I might be pro this now.
There are a lot of British writers that it is absolutely the right call to fight.
Yeah.
Because, like we said, George Bernard Shaw is complicated fellow, because there's some based stuff in there. Like, George Bernard Shaw is extremely capitalist critical. Mm-hmm. And that is also something that drew us to it, because he's a satirist at heart, and the absurdity of the wealthy is absolutely something that we should be bringing up. Like, it's kind of freaking absurd that in 2025 we are potentially looking at the world's first trillionaires.
No. No, thank you, please.
Very much no thank you, please. And obviously I'm not going to say anything that would legally get me in trouble, but...
Me neither, but...
It's just, we have friends who are putting up GoFundMes because the Eaton fires in Altadena destroyed their homes, and meanwhile, like, fucking Mark Zuckerberg is, like, trying to buy all of Hawaii, which, hate that
Hasn't
so
Hawaii
much.
been through enough?
Leave Hawaii alone.
Please! But yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm about to move. In spite of the fact that I actually make a decent amount of money, well over minimum wage, I'm still struggling to find something that is within my budget, even with knowing I'm going to have a roommate. It's ridiculous. No one should be allowed to be a trillionaire when I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm sorry.
Raise the minimum wage, instate a maximum wage.
Mm-hmm.
You make a certain amount of money, and after that, it's congratulations, you won capitalism. You're done. Go home.
But yeah, and additionally, like, Shaw clearly has a lot of respect for Eliza as a character. And that's actually really impressive for, again, a white man of the time. Like, her whole arc is learning to tell Henry Higgins to fuck off, basically.
Shaw writes fantastic dialogue, and I believe he was actually a suffragette, follow a supporter of the suffragette movement, and
I can believe that.
his political opinions when it comes to the nobility and poverty and things like that show up in his work. And
which is awesome. It would be even more awesome if he actually, learned it.
Yeah, and like the one real major change that I've found with this particular script is specifically the end. Instead of Henry basically still thinking he has the last laugh, you kind of give Henry this moment, this very brief moment of clarity. Like, this is a Henry on the edge of an epiphany, and I am a sucker for that sort of thing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the decision to do that.
The version that we're using, which was a reading version from like 1912 or something like that, it ends with a smug Higgins standing in the middle of the room with no actual indication. For Shaw, it was more important that Higgins not learn his lesson. And that's also mentioned in the epilogue. But we're not writing any original dialogue or anything like that. But we are going to use a trick we used before called face acting. And you're going to get from our Henry has certainly not learned his lesson, but has realized that he has ruined something before the play is over. So that was something that Sam and I were in agreement that we didn't like the Higgins learns nothing ending because it just didn't sit right. And we were worried that it would look like, oh, Eliza might come back and he's not, he's going to win. And so we wanted to find a way within the bounds of the script to make it obvious that, no, dude, you screwed this up. That's it. It's done.
You should have listened to her.
Listen to anything she said ever. But yes.
She went on and on about how in spite of how he treated her all throughout the play, she still just wanted to be friends. He just couldn't stand, in spite of everything he says about wanting her to be his equal, he can't actually stand it if she's his equal.
And it fits with some of the stuff about sexism and the way that women are treated that we wanted to focus on.
It absolutely does reflect in, especially modern times almost, because there are so many guys out there who will claim that, no, I don't want my girlfriend to be subservient to us, and no one actually wants that now. And I'm just like, are you sure? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because it seems like you not listening to women talk about their experiences kind of betrays another thing. Maybe you don't realize it, but it does.
Yeah.
There's just always a point in almost every IER episode where we think about the real world too hard.
Well.
We did do some editing of that.
Because in the end of the original text, he kind of just starts laughing at, oh, she's going to marry Freddie. But see, I almost interpreted that as him laughing through the tears in a way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's a very hard thing to do without making it seem like Henry wins in the end.
That is fair. But I always read it as deep down he knows he's lost and he's trying to put up a brave face. That's kind of how I read it. That's kind of how I literally read it, because, I do the opening with the beginning of the text, the ending with the end of the text in the episodes. And yeah, I kind of played it as like he's laughing, but it's clear it's not a happy laugh.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when I've read the play, I've looked at it and I've been like, I think that's a level of self-awareness that Higgins doesn't have.
Which is fair. That is super fair. You could also read it as, you fucking fool, you have no idea what you just lost, do you?
Because it's been a running joke in rehearsals. It's like, yes. And Higgins learned nothing.
And unfortunately, the Higgins of the world rarely do learn anything.
I would really like it if the Higgins of the world would learn something, but I don't think we should be putting impoverished young women in the position of doing all that emotional labor.
He will fix himself if he knows what's good for him.
And the problem is he doesn't know what's good for him.
I know. Mr. Darcy, this man is not.
No, 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 no.
No, I think Mr. Darcy would deck this guy, to be honest.
I don't know if we settled on the Anti-Higgins League, the Higgins Defamation Society.
Yeah.
We were trying to figure out what to call an organization that is just dedicated to roasting Henry Higgins and ripping him to shreds at all times, at all costs.
It's a good question. Like, there's so many good options there. And it would make for good merch.
It really, really would. And I'm still thinking about it all the time. I don't want to put more on Addie because, God, Addie has worked so hard for this and we appreciate her so much. She made this beautiful graphic for us that I absolutely adore.
No, it's so good. But yeah, we probably should at the very least settle on a name.
Yeah.
So dear listeners,
get in the comments!
Get in the comments. Tell us what we call our anti-Higgins club.
I mean, that could work. I kind of want to make, like, a pithy acronym.
Ooh, pithy acronyms are fun.
Yeah. I mean, nothing's ever going to top AUCA, but that's that.
Well, yeah.
I will also, I'll shout out our entire cast, but I also want to especially shout out our narrator, Nadine Hart, who is also doubling as our dialect coach and had to listen to us butcher various words and regional dialects of her homeland.
I'm genuinely shocked I haven't gotten more notes from her. It's like, oh wow, I'm not butchering it that much. Thank you, I guess.
Yeah, listeners, spoiler alert, this production consists almost entirely of Americans. So
if there are any British listeners here, I do apologize for my Cockney accent. I'm hoping I'm not Dick Van Dyke levels.
There's not much else that I can think of without totally giving it away. I think we've done a lot of stuff that the Groundlings chat in the stream is absolutely going to love. I'd like to think that we've figured out some clever things to work around the physical limitations of Zoom in what is kind of a very physical play despite the formality of everything.
Yeah, no, God, the chocolate scene.
Oh, God. Freaking chocolates.
It has been so hard to figure out how to make it look like Henry is basically force-feeding Eliza chocolate over Zoom.
Other than that, I will say class is a lie. Gender is a lie. You should not have to seek external validation from others to feel confident in who you are.
Mm-hmm. Don't be a Henry Higgins.
Don't be a Henry Higgins. There, now your accent sounds better than mine.
Oh, I don't know. Why don't we talk a little bit about just the fundraising aspect of this, of course?
So Worlds Allsair is a theater company, is a fully virtual charity-based theater company that was founded in summer of 2020 because of COVID, but timed specifically because of the George Floyd protests.
That first Midsummer Night's Dream performance was a fundraiser for bail funds for the protesters, in fact.
This is technically the last show of our 2024 season, and we are doing a fundraiser right now that will be going until a couple days after the play. The play itself is streaming live on YouTube and Twitch on Saturday, February 1st, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then once we've run through the show and its process, which takes YouTube a couple of hours, it'll be up and available to watch whenever you like on YouTube. And then the fundraiser is going to keep going through that weekend of February 1st, and that's specifically to fund our spring show, TBD, based on how the fundraiser goes. And then we already have something planned for March, which I'm not going to tell you what it is, but this would be for the fundraiser is mostly for what would come after that. And then if you miss the fundraiser, our regular donation thing will be available, and that you can support us that way, share our stuff on social media, come see the show at a time that's convenient for you. It's going to be really good. So I'm excited for everyone to see all the hard work everybody has done.
We're all really grateful for this company. We really are. And if you are a regular listener of this show, you know that most of our regulars here are people I met through Worlds Elsewhere. So No Worlds Elsewhere, there's no indie retelling, so it would really mean a lot to us if you could send what you can. Obviously, we know times is hard and is only going to get harder at this point. But still, if you have room in your wallets, please consider donating. It would mean a lot to us. And I'm sure Alana's already got some fun ideas if we do manage to make our goals.
Oh, yes. We have some ideas in mind already if we do make the goal. But unfortunately, if we don't, the project we have in March may be the last thing we do because money is very tight between, natural disasters and political things that as a charity I can't strictly go into.
But I, Editor Jasmine, who is a woman, who is queer, who is the Latina child of immigrants, can in fact say it, fuck these Nazi fuckers that have hijacked my country. And one of the things that's keeping me going in these terrifying times is the thought that maybe, just maybe, the various communities that I am part of will make you regret coming after us like this.
Obviously, we know that there's a lot of strain on financial health. We mentioned that we have friends who are affected by the Southern California wildfires ongoing right now. There is absolutely every need to also have mutual funds in the back pocket for trans people, for people who are otherwise going to be negatively affected by Grover Cleveland 2.0.
Oof.
But Worlds Elsewhere's mission has always been socially distanced, socially progressive, socially conscious theater. We would like to keep doing that. It's hard to keep a theater going, even like a customary theater. And while we don't have the cost of, maintaining a space, it's still a lot to make sure that we can pay actors what they deserve and have some level of costuming and pay our technical crew something worthwhile. And we would really appreciate donations to our Give Butter campaign that is going to be going up. We'll also be, I think, running donations through our eventual Musica Universalis 3, which is going to be later in the year, but giving is such a blessing. I'm still deeply touched that one of the last gifts my late grandmother gave me was a donation to Worlds Elsewhere last year that actually put us over our fundraising goal before we even started the stream. So for her, for me, for everybody who has been brought together, this podcast, my podcast, River's podcast, Ellie's podcast, a lot of what we do, a lot of the people who are now so dear to us would not exist because of Worlds Elsewhere. So that's another reason to give.
Yeah, there's a reason I didn't start this during the height of COVID when I would have had a lot more time for it. It's because I hadn't met all of these people yet. Worlds Elsewhere revived the idea that I could be an actor after years of being passed over in high school and college productions. And it brought me some of my best friends. And I mean, I am playing a dream role right now because of this. Like, what theater kid hasn't wanted to play Eliza Doolittle, I ask you?
The ones who wanted to, for some reason, play Henry Higgins.
I mean, who doesn't love to play a villain?
That, and I think Henry Higgins is a godsend musically to every theater kid who's like, oh no, I don't know how to sing and I'm not a good dancer.
That is also true. But so, yeah, obviously there are bigger issues in the world. But if you're listening to this podcast, it would really mean a lot to us if you could donate what you can. Don't make it the last time these curtains fall.
Please, and thank you.
Theater does matter. Like, again, hierarchy of needs and whatnot. But for me, theater's always been a way to escape or even to confront what's wrong with the world. So I would hate to see this go down.
If you follow us on socials, you will see stuff there. Facebook and Instagram are where we are right now, and that's where the news is first right now.
I mean, it feels a little silly to do pluggables after we just talked so much about the fundraising, but
yeah,
at some point we might also cover My Fair Lady on my podcast, since we've already done it on IER. I know there are a bunch of other Pygmalion retellings that will show up on IER that could also show up on my podcast. Hi, Freddie Prinze Jr. Jazz, Jazz, are you okay? Jazz?
Oh no, please tell me the April Fool's Day thing isn't happening again!
What's all this then?
Eliza?
Yes, I'm sorry, have we met before?
In a manner of speaking, it's, do you know the science fiction writer H.G. Wells?
Oh, my sister-in-law Clara, she's quite a fan of those, actually.
Yes, so let's just say that this is an H.G. Wells kind of scenario. Like a time machine, but more of a time and space machine. Dear God, am I about to give Eliza Doolittle the idea for Doctor Who? Never mind, please ignore that. I'm somebody who has heard your story. I think you are absolutely brilliant, and...
Oh, I can't imagine why, but thank you, I suppose.
Well, for one thing, you did a great job at asserting your own personhood and standing up to a certain very annoying phonetics professor.
Oh, Henry.
Oh, you're on a first-name basis now. Does that mean things are going okay?
Well, I try not to gossip anymore, but essentially Colonel Pickering, if you know him, if you know my story, I suppose, he was so insistent that we try to work things out. So, yes, every so often I still visit, but most of the time I end up giving him, shall we say, a piece of my mind?
Well, I'm glad to see there's been some level of reconciliation, and I hope that's going well. But yes, oh my goodness, I'm a little bit starstruck.
Starstruck for me? Really, there's no... Oh my goodness, I'm being so rude. How do you do?
How do you do?
What was your name?
My name is Sam Marcioni. I am a theater director who is directing a production of a play based on your life.
Oh, about how I met Professor Higgins, I suppose. Oh dear.
About how you met Professor Higgins and he and Colonel Pickering made the bet to teach you elocution.
Right, yes. Oh, I will admit I'm a little nervous about that then.
I think it's going to go really, really well. We've got an absolutely brilliant performer playing you. We've got a really great cast in general. Things might be a little different from how they actually went down, because I had to take some creative liberties, but I promise that at the heart of it has been a hope to do you justice.
I truly don't know what to say. This is very kind of you.
Yes, and unfortunately, I think you're actually in the abode of the actor playing you right now in a place called Florida.
Oh, I suppose that makes sense. You are clearly American, and so is she. Oh, this is...
yeah, things are complicated over here, so it's good to have... It's good to have role models like you who will stand up to irascible bullies.
Well, yes, he is quite the bully, if I may speak freely.
Oh, by all means. Tell me everything. Tell me the most embarrassing possible thing you can about him. Give us the dirt.
I mean, I sort of put aside having too much dirt on me, but...
Oh, no, not physical dirt. Gossip. Scuttlebutt.
Ah, I see. Oh, all right.
We'll leave the actual dirt to... Oh, wait, no, your father doesn't do that anymore.
No, he does not, and he's still miserable as ever.
As we sometimes like to say, turnabout is fair play, isn't it?
Oh, I will admit, I've heard that Americans are usually much more forthcoming, but...
I don't know if that's an American thing or 100 years in the future kind of thing.
You have a very good point. That 100 years, my goodness. Well, now I have questions, I will admit.
Well, by all means, go ahead.
Yes, I hardly know where to begin. Is it still so difficult for a flower girl like me to find a way to be more respectable?
Flower girls are not exactly a common profession anymore. We do have florist shops occasionally, but they're mostly in grocery stores now. Or through this thing called the internet, which is an entirely different kettle of fish. It's kind of like a telephone or a telegram, but it can also send pictures and sound. We are actually talking through the internet right now.
You know, I was wondering what it was going on with this little metal screen thing. Okay, so it's almost like a photograph, but I can see movement. Oh my goodness. I mean, I've heard of this sort of thing, but it's usually not that smooth.
It's kind of like Professor Higgins's recording devices.
Yes, precisely, yes. I was about to say, because I do see that she seems to have some flowers here, and that has eyes. Why does that have eyes?
That's for Halloween, I think. Jazz is very fond of spooky stuff.
I see. We don't really do Halloween in my time. I don't know if you know that. Or at least
that's disappointing. It's a lot of fun here, although a lot of people do also just use it as an excuse to dress very scantily in the hopes that they will have certain relations. I won't subject you to that. I know you're a good girl.
Quite right I am. Thank you very much. Although I am married now, and Freddie has been quite helpful in my feeling more confident in that sort of thing.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure.
You know, we've actually tried to start a flower shop of our own. We're not doing as well as we'd like, but we're trying.
I sincerely hope that it goes well for you. I won't bore you with the details, but it's very, very hard to open up a shop in this day and age as well, unfortunately. So I absolutely relate to you.
Oh, I'll admit I suppose I never really thought much about what it would be like 100 years in the future. Oh, we're in the new millennium now. Fascinating. But still, I would have hoped there'd be more prosperity if I was to think about it very much.
Yes, we are in the year 2025 right now, but Eliza, I don't know that I have the full breadth of economic intelligence to explain inflation and starvation wages and minimum wages and wage theft to you. Just let me assure you, things are much simpler in your timeline right now. That doesn't necessarily mean better. It's just an observation that there are fewer steps to obtaining or losing money in your era.
I see. Well, that sounds like quite the shame, I must say.
I'll say this. If you have a chance to cut it off at the head, health insurance is a scam. It's exploitative. What? Make sure that the NHS, the National Health Service in Britain, stays as it is. Single-payer healthcare is the way of the future, Eliza.
I see.
Single-payer healthcare.
Right. All right, I will certainly try to remember that. Perhaps the Colonel and the Professor can shed some light on this. I mean, don't tell him I said that if you happen to run into him.
I'll keep that in mind.
Are you quite all right? Is America doing quite all right?
No! We're really not, Eliza. I'm so sorry.
I see. I'm very sorry to hear that.
I don't know that England's doing very well either right now.
I see. Right.
It's kind of like none of us are really doing that well. We're all kind of very badly off right now, except for very, very wealthy people at the very, very top that honestly, I think even Professor Higgins would find distasteful.
I mean, say what you will about his actions, he does claim he does not believe that it should be so different between the classes. He believes that he is treating everyone as if we were in heaven.
You know what, Eliza? Before whatever this rip in time and space is resolves and you presumably go back to your life that I hope will be happy, I'd love to, show you a couple of different, they're called movies. They're recorded plays you can watch over and over again. And we also have a variation of them called television shows.
Over and over again? Oh, they're all some plays I would very much like to see over and over again.
Yeah, I'm going to show you something called The Good Place, and hopefully we have enough time to get through all 4 seasons of it before you go back.
4 seasons?
It's complicated. I'll explain television to you later.
Very, very well. I'm flattered to be invited. Thank you very much. 1 binge session later. Oh my. I'll admit I didn't understand everything, but that was quite moving.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite shows, and I'm glad that you liked it too. And Oh boy, we've been here for a while. I forgot how fast that can happen.
Truly, thank you very much for inviting me and sharing it with me while I was here.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Eliza.
Oh, of course. Again, I'm very pleased to have been here, although I really should be getting back to my husband, and I'm sure you're concerned about your friend. Now, how do we... I don't suppose you know how I can... Ow! Oh, just you wait, Henry Higgins. As a former educator, I just have to say that you...
Oh, hi, Sam. Oh my god.
Punching Henry Higgins?
Slippery bastard kept evading me.
Oh.
Colonel Pickering was no help, I'll tell you what. We were just chasing each other all throughout London. It was ridiculous. I feel like Mrs. Higgins really could have used some popcorn during this, though.
Yeah, that sucks. Eliza and I had a great time. We watched The Good Place.
Oh, that's lovely. I wish I could have... I guess maybe I'll figure out a way to invite her when we inevitably cover that.
Anyway, after all that, please check us out on February 1st for Worlds Elsewhere Theater Company's production of Pygmalion. In the meantime, you can also catch me as the host of 6 Degrees of Star Wars, available wherever pods are cast, and on the wider internet as Demisem.
And as always, you can find me at FavorVR on all the socials, and you can follow this show on Twitter, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Just search for A Niche Retelling. And you can find all of our episodes wherever pods are cast. And I know we're already asking for a lot of donations, but if you do have room in your heart and your wallets after you support this theater we love so much, please consider donating to our Patreon, our Ko-Fi, or the Support the Show link below. Or at the very least, please spread the word about this podcast to all the nerds in your life and give us ratings on the podcatcher of your choice, or leave us a review or a comment. I am, of course, going to be very busy next weekend because of this very show, so expect another outtake special, but you can expect an episode come Valentine's Day, but I'm going to keep it a little quiet because we are still working that out, actually. But please come join us in the near future, and remember, stories gain power in each retelling. I'm afraid you spoiled that girl, Henry. I should be uneasy about you and her if she were less fond of Colonel Pickering. Pickering? Nonsense. She's going to marry Freddie. Freddie. He is amazed, but stands rejoicing in his doubt. While fearful there is some mistake, again and yet again, gives trial to his hopes by touching with his hand. It must be flesh. The veins pulsate beneath the careful test of his directed finger. Then, indeed, the astonished hero poured out lavish thanks to Venus, pressing with his raptured lips to his statue's lips. Now real, true to life, the maiden felt the kisses given to her, and blushing, lifted up her timid eyes, so that she saw the light and sky above, as well as her rapt lover while he leaned gazing beside her. And all this at once. The goddess graced the marriage she had willed. And when 9 times the crescent moon had changed, increasing to the full, the statue bride gave birth to her dear daughter Paphos, from which the famed event the island takes its name.